from the legal aid community and all of our supporting organizations. It's always the highlight of our year to come together, and we either do it before or after elections. This year we decided to do the other approach, but it's really great for the civil team to have a chance to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the critical issues that NLADA is working on, and particularly focus on the challenges of the future. We're very excited about today's program. I just wanted to introduce to some of you, or reintroduce to most of you, Chris Berger. He is our civil counsel. Those of you particularly receiving federal funding for legal aid, both LSC and non, should know that Chris is available to consult with you, to discuss regulatory matters, compliance matters, and Chris has been a real asset since he started at NLADA. David Miller, our other colleague who works mostly on policy work, can't join us this morning. He's on the defender side, but David is just doing a really terrific job at NLADA, as are our staff for the conference, Stephanie Griffith-Richardson and Brian Bertanesian. We like hyphenated events planners, but they both are just working. Stephanie's overdoing the Farm Worker Conference, but they're really doing great work. And we're very happy to have our colleagues here from the Legal Services Corporation, from the American Bar Association, both the Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defendants, as well as the Pro Bono and Public Service Committee of the ABA, who we co-sponsor the Equal Justice Conference with, are meeting in conjunction with the conference, showing again their steadfast support for access to justice and the work that you do. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to address this caucus immediately after the election of 2016. Many of you were there. Now that was an experience. If you remember, you remember the sort of the red-eyed staggering around we were doing in the halls. And having that chance to talk at that moment was really an experience. We were all more than a little bit stunned by the outcome that night, but I was taken by the resilience of the community as exhibited at this very meeting 2 years ago. We drew strength from the lessons of our past. If a challenge for federal civil legal services was to come, we always have had our sweet spot, and that is strong, bipartisan, and powerful support for the work that you do and the client stories that result from that work. Now, 2 years later, we find ourselves in a much different place. To date myself just a little bit, what a long, strange trip it's been. We're very happy to be in Texas, to be... I can't tell you how supportive that Lone Star has been here in Houston, Northwest Texas, TRALA, the Texas Legal Services Center. There's such a strong community of advocates in this state that we are so proud to be among you, and really happy to focus on your work. Judge Livingston, Betty, the host committee has just been outstanding, and we're, the work that we all admired so much in this city not long ago. After Harvey, we were very proud to be honoring Sandra Brown and all the work of Lone Star in that amazing time. We're also happy to have with us tomorrow our latest rock star Republican. That will be the Chief Justice of Texas, Nathan Hecht, who, if you don't know, what a hero he's been in our political struggles for the last 2 years, you will learn more about it at our luncheon tomorrow. We're so happy the Chief Justice could be with us. He's in court this week, and he's on the ballot Tuesday, I believe, but I doubt he has real serious opposition. We've been very busy at NLADA this year. we focus on the key resources that allow you to do your work so effectively for the clients you serve. We've focused on our driving principle that justice is not a partisan issue, and I think we've proven that with the number of allies who have joined our call since the President called for LSC's elimination. That inspired such an outpouring. Most people in this room are familiar with the Conference of Chief Justices, the work we did with the General Counsel community, the law firm. Down the road, it's just been amazing, the turnout and energy that has been brought to this fight over the last 2 years. LSC has done a terrific job in its role as the agency and an educator of Congress. We now have sports stars and business leaders and everyone else on the Leaders Council. I mean, we have really become a mature and effective part of our civil justice system. We've never been stronger and we've never been more effective. And NLADA has been working very hard to take advantage excuse me, of those resources. And I'm going to give you a very brief overview of where we are this year. We will be talking, obviously, during the course of the conference in much more detail about matters that affect legal aid. But just as most of you know, I don't think we've ever had an NLADA meeting where the budget for LSC had ever been resolved by the time we were meeting. So yet again, Congress has not done its work. It's been over 22 years now since they actually funded the government on time. But I don't recall in a long time us being in a better position going into the conference that will take place sometime after the lame duck session convenes subsequent to the election. The House and Senate have both agreed to level funding for LSC. We would have liked an increase, but given the fact that a $25 million increase was applied last year in a program that the administration was ardently trying to eliminate, I think we're pretty happy, particularly in the fact that the House raised its request to $110 million to be level with the Senate. That's really strong. That's progress. I think it does show the amazingly bipartisan support we have in the Congress. I was trying to think this morning, who else is sitting here talking about strong bipartisan support right now? Legal aid? I mean, how did that happen? It happened a lot because of the work we do in the room, and we've been very busy trying to take advantage of that national effort. Most of you are aware of the fact that 6 members have been appointed to the LSC board. I'm not going to go into detail about them. We will later in the conference. It's looking like now the 115th Congress will probably not get to the confirmation process for those 6 people, which, in my view, unfortunately, means that we will probably have to start over in the new conference. Those appointments would expire as the Congress adjourns. But again, the strong signals of support that those board appointments signified, again, addressed one of the big fears we brought into the year. So we'll be following that very closely. Radica and others at NLADA, we've been working tirelessly, becoming good stewards of the federal programs beyond LSC, working with the new administration, which is a trip sometimes. But we also saw appropriations on programs that are really critical to our clients. Some of the Violence Victims of Crime Act programs, reentry work, human trafficking, the opioid crisis, veterans work. So much of the vital work that you do was strongly funded in the appropriation bills that have gone forward today. And we are really focused on continuing to grow those programs, even in an environment like we're faced with now. The future of our program, to a great extent, depends on good young lawyers coming into the system. And we and a lot of other people in Washington have thought tirelessly to preserve the public service loan forgiveness program. I'm happy to tell you those proposals to eliminate, both from the White House and the House, will also expire on the adjournment of this Congress. So we'll start over, and I can't tell you how much difference the election might make and who controls the House with regard to that debate. But again, we saw strong support. There's quite a coalition of all kinds of professions involved in that, and we're very, very happy to be a part of it. I hope a lot of you heard about our Fair Pledge and our racial justice initiatives. If you haven't heard about it, please, let's talk about it. Go to our website. We think it's the appropriate time, given what's going on in our country right now, for us to evidence our strong support for racial justice and communities under attack in our system. But particularly, we're happy to be here with you all. It's really amazing to look at, from a national level, the impact of the work that you're doing to address the key issues of the day. Here in Texas, the work you're doing on the border, on family separation. Across the country, who would have thought evictions would be in vogue? But there's so much going on around homelessness and eviction work, and we're actually talking about it in a positive way in public. That's wonderful work on your part. The opioid response, on down the road, I could just go on for all the work that you're doing. Being in Houston, it's hard not to also just say, once again, unfortunately, we've been hit by natural disasters left and right, and I'm always amazed by the response of our community. You'll hear more about the Houston effort, and I'm sure you already have. The wildfires, Hadassah, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. What happened last year was remarkable, and this year there's a number of people from North Carolina, from Wilmington, who are still without power after the hurricane struck so long ago. I think Nalani mentioned that Lee is here from Micronesia, absent a roof and windows to his home, and we're just so happy he can be here, and they're already organizing quite a response in Micronesia and the Marianas. You do make a real difference every day, and not everybody can say that about their work. NLADA is proud to be your colleagues and at times your voice. What a great time to be a legal aid advocate. Finally, it's an exciting and upbeat time at NLADA as well, as we strengthen ourselves for future challenges. We've restructured our board to include some of the leading attorneys and general counsel in the United States to give us a broader message as we interact at the national level. But particularly internally, I'm happy to report to you that Radhika Singh has been promoted to the position of Chief of the Civil Legal Services Division of NLADA. Starting in about a minute and a half, Radhika will begin to lead the broad array of civil issues the association addresses every day. Most of you have seen Radhika at work and know what skills and passion she brings to the fight for equal justice. I've really enjoyed watching her emerge as a dynamic leader in our community. I'm not going anywhere. Maybe she wishes I would. I actually will become the Senior Vice President for Strategic Alliances, which is a fancy title for spending more time lobbying on your behalf and working with my wonderful colleagues at NLADA on some of the broader policy issues like loan forgiveness, which is a particular passion of Radhika's, and some of the public defenders' civil intersections. So I'm really looking forward to having a little more time and really, really looking forward to Radhika's leadership. So the podium is yours. Thank you for being here.
And thank you all for that reception. That's very kind of you. I won't say much because we have to stay on schedule. We have a great panel planned for you, but I will say, to echo what Don said, which is that you are a group that never fails to inspire us at NLADA. You're resilient. I love my job, and I'm happy and excited to be able to work with you in a broader capacity. Not everyone gets to say that they're often affiliated with the smartest people in the room, and beyond that, the most committed people in the room. So getting to be your advocate, not just on federal funding, but on broader issues, is my dream come true. So thank you for the opportunity, and don't fail to tell me when I mess up. But we have a strong team here, and like Don said, it's really exciting for us to be able to focus more on the policy work within Congress as well. It's something that's, we know how all of these issues intersect, and that advocacy at the federal level is why we exist for you, and we love to do it, and to be able to do that in a broader capacity with Don and David and Chris. We just hope we can do good by you. So, and I know we'll hear from you if we don't. So with that said, we have a great conference for you. Thank you to everyone, not just for being here, but we can't put on these conferences without you, obviously. The time that you put into your proposals, into your sessions, into participating in these important conversations is what makes the conference. So you are the ones who really put on the conference. Thank you for that. I will say that a lot of our work is obviously done through collaborations. It's not just a sense of community, but it's actually acting like a community, and that's how we get things done, and that's at this conference, and it's at the national level, and it's at the local level. And to that end, we have some programming at the conference that will highlight some of the exciting things that are happening across the country, from the Justice for All projects. Don mentioned the ABA is here, and actually launching an important report that they just issued on access to justice commissions. We're excited to be able to do that at our conference. We have sessions on strategic advocacy. We have sessions on board and organizational management. We also have sessions on substantive issues, of course, that folks are working on every day. I do want to highlight again our racial justice track. So the thing that makes, I think, is difficult for our community is that we don't have a session that's just on racial justice, right? Because all of the work that you do every day is racial justice work. And so we don't have a standalone track. What we have marked in your books and on the app are sessions that will focus on that racial justice lens of the work that you do. So please pay attention to that and attend some of those sessions. We also have some sessions, of course, on communications, which is very important in our world, and you will see why I said that because I have a transition right now to call up one of the national partners that is so strong advocating for legal aid across the country, which is Voices for Civil Justice. Soren Rasmussen, a member of the Voices team, is here to launch an exciting project. I will say, don't blame Soren if he also speaks quickly, because we've given him a strict time limit and he has promised to abide by that. But obviously, if you have more questions or comments, Soren will be around for the conference.
All right. Thank you, Radhika, and thank you to the NLADA for allowing us to present today. It's a really exciting project, and we, as you have heard through the conference, we really depend on your buy-in to make sure that it becomes a success. My name is Soren. I'm the Media Relations Manager at Voices for Civil Justice, and 5 years ago, my colleague Martha Bergmark, who many of you know, effectively launched Voices for Civil Justice right here at the Civil Caucus with our messaging research. And since then, we have grown a network of more than 1,500 people, and we've had a hand in more than 400 media placements around civil legal aid, and we could not have done this without you. And you are invaluable partners in that, which is why we hope you will also help us launch what we call the next big thing. As you heard in the opening, we have some way to go, and national foundations do not understand the basics around civil justice in America. And this brings us again to the next big thing. And we will launch a digital storytelling campaign, and we call it All Rise for Civil Justice. And in the next 5 minutes, you will get a kind of exclusive first look of sort of what it will look like, and what we're trying to do here. So this is not a done project. It still has a key component missing, and that is you and your input. And when you have it, please find me during the conference or afterwards. We want to hear your ideas. We want to hear your ideas for the narrative, how we can share these types of stories, and which type of stories that we should include into this project. So what's behind this? We have been emboldened when we've seen the movement around criminal justice reform, to their ability to establish a narrative, at least where the people in power and influence understand what's at stake, the gross injustices of that system, and how they can at least they have the narrative to rally around and try to make a change off of that. But what about the story of civil justice? We think that no such story really exists. So, all too few people understand this. And most are, I dare say, sitting in this room. Which means those who can change this do not understand the magnitude of the problem or the scalable solutions that exist to solve the problem. Now, there are many reasons why that is, but I want to start with the one we can actually change, and that is us. Me. So we all believe in what Chief Justice Hecht is saying here. But our research and our daily media monitoring show that we're not yet making this case in a systemic way. We're not making the case around the civil justice system in itself and how it exacerbates social problems and issues. And if nobody tells our story, somebody else is happy to tell that story on our behalf. And I don't know about you, but I don't want this story to be told by an administration who doesn't believe that the legal services corporations should exist. We can't allow that to happen. So this project will try to establish a core narrative around the state of civil justice in America, one that will change an unfortunate, enduring, and harmful narrative that exists all the way back from the tort reform movement in the 90s, and one that defines the broader civil justice crisis. It will include shareable visuals for you in the field. We will also be happy to create these types of assets for those organizations who don't have the capacity in itself. That will be a part of this project too. So our goal is to tell stories about the crisis. And it's about how the systemic lack of legal help means that the law and legal protections are out of reach for all too many Americans, particularly for those who struggle to make ends meet. And stories about the corporate takeover of the courts, stories about the racial injustice in the civil system, and stories about the outdated processes that were created by lawyers for lawyers. And hopefully these stories can be shared by activists and by partners, and it will be something across the country that people can rally around, that can make people outraged, that they can go to their local politicians to advocate on their behalf, and they can share to grow elite and public awareness in general. And we've got to make sure too that Mr. Simon from the Kresge Foundation don't have to keep using these things at their parties. We just can't allow it to keep happening. So the All Rise campaign will also have stories that kind of help us spotlight these types of solutions that make a difference. So it will be about states and about cities who have benefited from investing in all kinds of legal help. That a solution to domestic violence can be centered around changing the court processes or establishing self-help centers, or that a response to the opioid crisis can be to put lawyers in schools. And this will allow us to advocate more consistently, nationally and across state lines, and credibly make the case that providing Americans with the legal help they need when they need it, and the form they can use, is an invaluable societal resource. We also want this to be a model for storytelling in our community. It will be a one-stop shop, for resources that enable you to better tell your stories in a way that incorporates the civil justice frame into it. And as I mentioned, you will be able to ask us help and ask us to create all types of different digital assets that you might need in your work. So, how do you sign up? And this is the one moment where you're allowed to take off your phones. If you open your browser and go to this link, allrights4civiljustice.org, you will see a place where you can sign up and you can get updates as we move this project ahead. And it will take 10 seconds. I encourage you to do so right now. And in closing, I just want to say that everybody in this room is committed to access to justice and to justice for all. And this is certainly the time to start speaking up and how far we are from fulfilling that promise, but also, more importantly, how we can get there. And we can't do this without you, and we hope that you will join us on this adventure. Thank you.
Thank you, Soren, and thank you for the work that you do every day at Voices, with the Voices team for our community. I will now call up our panel discussion. So folks who may have looked in the program or looked on the app, you will see that we do have a theme for today's caucus, where we were trying to be, I think, a little forward-thinking in what we would present here today. I think last year we did a year in review, and this year we wanted to do maybe years to come, to take advantage of some of the opportunities that our community has right now. So we're focusing on a technology, and folks in the room will know that technology can be used in good ways in the delivery of services, but there are also some challenges that the community faces, both in the delivery of services, but also the use of technology in substantive programs on which our clients rely, critical welfare programs in which the use of technology, I think, implicates real questions and issues around due process, and how do we as advocates respond to that? How do we prepare our clients to respond to that? So our panel will discuss some of the exciting things, I think, happening around technology and the use of in the delivery of services, and how we can be at the table there, and what we should be looking out for, and also some of the challenges. So I will turn it over to NLADA to talk more about the format and who's going to present, but I will say we tried to make it very exciting, and I think folks up here are excited to do that, right? So Nalani Fujimori-Kaina, who everyone saw this morning and most people know, Executive Director in Hawaii and also on the Board of Directors for NLADA, has graciously agreed to moderate this panel. Nalani.
Thank you, Attica. So I guess I didn't really need to furiously type out a little introduction, but I will share it because I know some of you are thinking, this doesn't impact me. I mean, we still use WordPerfect in our program, and if I'm lucky, I can get reliable internet. And heck, I'm still learning my case management system, and I have no idea what an algorithm is. I mean, I went to law school because I was bad at math. So what are you talking about? And what we're here to say today is that whether we like it or not, artificial intelligence is here. And as civil legal services attorneys and advocates, it is not the invasion of robots. And our distinguished panel will help us explain a little bit. The timing sometimes is impeccable. And my husband just texted me a message that there was a story this morning that machine learning algorithm beats 20 lawyers in an NDA legal analysis. So, we should better learn about what we need to do. So what I wanted to say is that we were told that we have about an hour, and in that time frame we needed to give you some basics about AI, the challenges with it, have a dynamic conversation, and provide time for questions. So not too rough. So given that challenge, we asked our panelists to take on their own personal challenge and to do some timed Ignite presentations. So they've been asked to take on an aspect of AI as it impacts our community in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And there are going to be slides moving behind them on the big screens as they do this. A couple have done this before. But some are completely brand new to this, and one panelist disclosed that they had to practice over 10 hours, so this person's ready to go, so we'll find out who that is. Maybe you will know, maybe you won't. But let's cheer them on as they move forward, because it is a challenge, and after these presentations, we'll have a few questions, and then open up the conversation to you. So one last thing, the panelists don't know this, but because we're talking about AI, I thought to myself, what could be more fun but to find out what robot name that they would have. So I used a little name generator and came up with some interesting results. So with that, let's get started. Please welcome Ivy Ashton, the founder and president of Legal Server and Houston AI, aka Marvin Nomad.
So I was asked to give an introduction to artificial intelligence in 5 minutes. How do I start it?
Just click
I
it.
start with human intelligence. Click it.
And it's going to go.
Click it again.
Click it again. There we go. All right. So in 1998, Oprah Winfrey was being interviewed by Gene Siskel, and he asked her a question that she said totally took her by surprise, and she had no response to. He said, "Oprah, what do you know for sure? What in your heart of hearts do you know to be true?" When she talks. So I want to ask you, what do you know for sure? What I know for sure is that our legal system doesn't work unless everybody has equal access to it. What I know for sure is, looking out at this room, each of you work every day to try to solve that problem. But together, as hard as we work, we're still not able to solve it. So we need to get leverage through technology. And those technologies will have 3 things in common. They'll be simple, they'll be smart, and they'll be delivered through web services. What I know for sure is that our legal system is unnecessarily complex. It was written for lawyers, by lawyers. And if you're not a lawyer, you're going to have a really hard time navigating our legal system. So for the lawyers in the room that think technology is overcomplicated, I want to try to make it really simple. So technology is like any system we have: a justice system, a legal system, a case management system, whatever system. All systems do 3 things at their core. They take an input, they process it, and they give an output. Every part of a system has a task that it's trying to solve. So what I know for sure is that if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to have to use smart tools. And those tools, at their core, are just going to be solving a specific task. Now, they're going to have intimidating names. They're going to have names like artificial intelligence, or they're going to have names like machine learning or neural nets. And our first reaction is there's this barrier because we don't know what that means, right? So we automatically shut down because we're not quite sure how to understand this new technology. Let's just make it super simple, right? Let's just take it for what it is. It's just trying to solve a specific problem where a machine is doing something that a human used to do. So these types of tools are going to be able to do things like see, read, understand, translate from one language to another language, maybe from legalese to plain English, to plain language. Maybe they'll take your text and read it through voice. Maybe they'll take an address and calculate what the most optimal route to go is, right? So imagine just sending a client an automated text message 24 hours before they have to be in court and says, hey, remember, you have to be in court tomorrow at 10 a.m. That alone would solve a ton of problems, and it already is. But what if we took another piece of information and calculated the best route for them to get from their home to the court, either through public transportation or by driving? That's artificial intelligence, just technology, right? These things are going to talk to us. They're going to listen to us, right? And most importantly, they're going to understand the words that we're saying in the context of what those words mean in that sentence. So think about places where you can plug this type of tool into your delivery model. What I know for sure is web services before websites. And I want to say that again. That may be the most important thing I said. Web services before websites. What if I told you that in 10 years, websites would be akin to a fax machine? We'll probably all still have them, but we will rarely use them. So what is a web service? A web service is exactly what I've described before. It's a thing that takes a task and solves a problem. It's when you put your address into Amazon and it sends something to the U.S. Postal Service that says, is this a real address? And the Postal Service says yes or no, right? It's just computers talking to computers. So the real power of web services is when we connect them to the internet, because we can decentralize where all of these tasks have to take place. And there are lots of companies that build tools that are available through something called an API, which is another name for a web service. So what I know for sure is that we're going to solve this problem. We're going to solve it case by case. We're going to solve it lawyer by lawyer. We're going to solve it agency by agency. And we're going to do it together. And we're going to use tools like artificial intelligence to do it. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen and to be here. But most importantly, thank you for all of the work that you do every day to help people in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ivy. Now, next up is Julia Simon Michelle from Philadelphia Legal Assistance, who's a staff attorney with the Public Benefits Unit, aka Plex 3PL.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you a bit of whiplash because I'm actually going to be talking about some of the dangers involved in these new systems. And where that comes into play is when our government decides to use these systems to make determinations about what benefits our clients are eligible for. So the majority of state agency benefit systems still run on what are called mainframe computer systems from the 1950s that are difficult to update, expensive to maintain, and difficult to keep our private data safe. And I will say that in Pennsylvania, our former Secretary of the Department of Labor referred to our unemployment compensation system as held together by bubblegum and duct tape, which is why you saw those images on the screen before. Now, what's happening? So most state governments looked at modernizing their systems, moving off those mainframes in the mid-2000s because there was federal funding for it. In fact, for a lot of you who work with Medicaid, when Obamacare came out, or the Affordable Care Act, there was a push to modernize state Medicaid systems, and there was money and timelines for it. And so states started to move in this direction. But the problem has been that most of these new systems haven't worked. You'll see that these numbers, which are for unemployment insurance systems around the country, show how ineffective these new projects have been when we have been trying to put them in place to improve the efficiencies of our benefit eligibility systems, of our benefit delivery systems. And in fact, in Pennsylvania, we tried to do this with our unemployment insurance. In the early 2000s, spent $170 million and did not get a functioning system. Now, one of the aspects of these systems is that they're not being led and developed by the people in this room who know what end users of these systems need and know what they can and cannot use. In fact, they're being led by vendors, by private vendors who have a for-profit interest in making relationships with these agencies and putting these programs in place. Now, I'll tell you, I'm 31 years old. I don't think technology is evil. I'm not against technology as a whole, and in fact, many of my clients would love text messaging, would love a mobile application for their benefits, would love to receive their notice of determinations by email. But a lot of our clients are not there yet, and these projects still present specific difficulties for many of our client population. And in fact, so far, when we've been talking about these systems, we've generally focused on only one thing when looking at a lot of these new systems. Where did the telephone access go? Right? When these systems go into place in our states, usually it means that access to call centers, in-person one-stops have gone away, and people have been forced to only use the internet. That has narrowed who can use these services, that has cut people out of the system, and it has created additional barriers for our clients who already struggle with systems that are set up to be allegedly pro se, but as we all know, really require a lawyer. Now, what you might not even be able to see super clearly on this screen is a black box. Now, that's appropriate because one of the biggest issues with these new systems is that the companies are using what we refer to as black box technologies. They are using algorithms and data analytics that are not public, that are not clear, and they're using what we refer to as nudge technologies in order to push people in certain directions. That has caused huge issues with fraud. As you can see, Michigan updated its unemployment insurance system, and there were significant issues with what we referred to in the legal aid community as robo-fraud. When an employer says one thing and a claimant says another, the system said, oh, the claimant must be lying. Fraud. We've lost the human aspect of making determinations in these systems. Now, Pennsylvania recently decided it was going to try again at modernizing its unemployment insurance system, and I was asked by the legislature, what can we do to make it better? What can we do to make this process work? And I said, include the stakeholders. Include the people who know how the system works and who know the people using the system. And so after a funding debate in Pennsylvania that went on for quite some time, funding was given for a new project and included the creation of a Benefits Modernization Advisory Committee that for the first time had a claimant advocate involved in the development of one of these systems. Hello, that would be me. And I can tell you from being in this room with our government that is actually trying to do good, I believe our department wants to have a good product and wants to help people. There are so many questions they never think to ask because they don't know the people at a ground level, and we do. So I encourage us to continue talking about this topic. Thank you.
I just want to, again, give a hand to the first two who went ahead and did these presentations, so thank you. Okay, next up, Lester Bird, from the Principal Associate with the Pew Charitable Trust, aka Transparent Damon.
All right. Hello, I'm Lester Bird from the Pew Charitable Trust. Today I'm going to talk to you briefly about Pew, our civil legal system modernization team, and a technology called natural language processing. For those of you who may not be familiar, Pew, we are a nonpartisan public charity that conducts fact-based research and analysis to inform civic life. And we work in many policy areas from criminal justice reform to the environment to healthcare and now the civil legal system. Why the civil legal system? Well, as many of you know, research shows that people are increasingly going through the system without any legal help. And we're interested in highlighting and evaluating some emerging technologies that might assist these people. One of the technologies we're interested in is online dispute resolution, which is a way of streamlining court processes and putting them online so people can settle their case without going to a physical courtroom. We want to analyze these ODR implementations as they are happening throughout the country. Another technology we're interested in supporting are legal information portals. These portals make it easier for people to find accurate, relevant, jurisdiction-specific legal information online. I invite you to attend the late afternoon session today about the portal projects in Hawaii and Alaska. We're also interested in researching how people are interacting with the civil legal system and the effects it can have on them, as well as evaluating the effectiveness of systems like online dispute resolution and legal information portals. Additionally, we're also working to build partnerships with many groups and people across the public and private sectors, so together we can highlight and create potential solutions to the access to justice challenge this country is facing. So that's a quick overview of Pew and what we're doing, but today I wanted to highlight one piece of work we are supporting in this field, and that is teaching machines to recognize legal issues in people's questions. I mentioned earlier the Pew team is working with different legal information portal projects. One of the projects we are supporting is the Legal Navigator, which is being led by Microsoft and the Legal Services Corporation and piloted in Hawaii and Alaska. And one unique feature of the Legal Navigator is a guided assistant where a user can type in their legal question and be matched with appropriate legal resources. To make a guided assistant work well, a project supported by Pew was started between Stanford and Suffolk law schools to create a legal natural language processor. or NLP. The legal NLP will analyze human inputted questions and based on training data will make a statistical-based guess as to the user's legal intent. NLPs are useful in situations where it's not possible or cost-effective to have humans review and answer every question, like in an online legal information portal. The legal NLP works by looking for patterns in existing data sets of legal questions and identifying words and phrases in each legal question and comparing them to their legal issue area. From there, it creates machine learning algorithms which can look at future questions and apply a guess as to their legal intent. For example, if we have thousands of questions using the phrase "I'm getting kicked out," and these questions have all been tagged with the legal term eviction, machine learning algorithms can infer that in the future, if it sees the phrase "kicked out," it's most likely an eviction issue. To make good legal natural language processors, we need a large amount of legal questions asked in real words from real people to train the natural language processor. And then these questions need to be tagged by humans with their correct legal term. The Stanford and Suffolk teams have identified large quantities of questions from public and private sources, and they've created a game called Learned Hands to facilitate the tagging of these questions with legal terms. The way the Stanford-Suffolk process works is questions with unknown legal intent are gathered and plugged into the Learned Hands game, and when a consensus of game players agree on a legal term for a question, the question and legal intent are put into the final data set. And an algorithm then trains on the tagged questions, getting smarter over time as it sees more and more questions and their intents. But to be representative of all people, this project needs as much data from as many varied sources as possible. If you have any data set of questions from people asking about potential legal issues, please share them with the Stanford and Suffolk teams. They can accept both public and private data sets of questions. And also, play the game and start tagging questions. Just simply Google search Learned Hands Stanford. It's pretty addictive, I promise. There's even a leaderboard on there so you can compete. So, thanks for listening to me today. If you have any questions about natural language processing, Pew, our civil legal system modernization team, please feel free to reach out and let me know.
Any guess who practiced for 10 hours? I want to introduce next Claudia Johnson from Law Help Interactive Pro Bono Net. She's the program manager there, and welcome you to the stand. And her computer name, CompuRover.
Well, thank you. Okay, so this is where we were in 1999, right? Many years ago, everybody assumed that low-income people, communities of color, would not be on the internet. In fact, it didn't exist. But we did get there, and now we're talking about big data analytics and bringing technology to serve these communities. This may age yourselves. I don't know how many of you enrolled in college with the cards with the chats. Or I don't know how many of you used to have fun watching the video of the hamsters. In any event, information that we're using now, we're generating petabytes and petabytes of information. Most of it is going from entertainment to actually using the data to improve productivity, and more is embedded. Per user, we're generating tons of data. In my system, we create 500 million documents a day. Can you imagine how much data we're generating just on LHI if an interview can have over 200 fields and can produce over 71 interview can produce over 89 types of consumer law cases? In any way, what we're talking about here is data analytics, and what that means is looking at patterns, looking at data to recognize patterns using powerful supercomputers, powerful data analytics tools, and storage. And when you're talking about data as an attorney, you and your clients need to think about these questions. The most important one, who owns the data? Is it the data of the vendor? Are the clicks and the patterns yours, or the vendor that's using the machine? Are they going to track your IP address? Are they going to sell it? Now, what we know in public policy, when I used to do analysis for Medicare and mess with 14% of the GDP, is we need to know what the data is.
And as lawyers, we need to know what we can do and they can do with our clients' data. I think that we are at a point where we can use the data to generate hypotheses of how we're going to solve racism and poverty in the United States. That's where this has to go once we get done with improving administrative decisions like some of our panelists were talking about. And that's the vision. Now for us, we need to make sure that these super algorithms and all of that cause no harm. And that's what we're here for, because we represent communities that are vulnerable and have always been vulnerable. You know, a white man walks on a road, that's one-way road. A woman crosses 2, a person of color crosses 3. If you're Afro-Latina, you cross 4. So the key assumption is this is a bear, it's a circle. You're designing transportation from that, the bear stands up, what's going to happen to the bear, right? This is the same thing that's going on here. And if the data that is being used to train the systems is garbage, you're going to have what we call in public policy the Okigo principle. Garbage in, garbage out. Whatever is designed with that crappy data, it's going to have serious testing. Now we know that in technology there's a huge problem with gender and race. And there was a recent ABA article saying, that among funders, women are representing only at 13% and people of color at 26%. Context, environment, and culture in the teams designing these tools matters. And right now the representation is not good. If the vendor doesn't understand the reality of poor people in America, if the vendor doesn't have anyone in their team making decisions who has been through poverty, they're going to harm the bear. And life is not linear and complex. In Spanish, we have 5 different ways to say to do. Poverty is not linear. Racism is not linear. All these things compound each other. Most tools are doing good with linear data. So as you are working with your communities, make sure that you choose wisely and that it's you that asking the questions. And don't get caught up on the hype or the fallacy of thought that newer is better. Newer is not better until it is proven to be better. The last thing I wanted to leave you is an example where Amazon has been really hard trying to sell this recognition hardware, and they identify 38% of the Congress were people of color when there's only 20% of Congress people of color in Congress. The bottom line is that as legal aid lawyers, it doesn't matter how intimidating it looks, how superstar it looks, whatever, we have to get jiggy with data. We have to dance with it, we have to learn with it, because data, computers, big data, that's the future. And our practice of law is gonna be there. It's already there. So just have fun with it. Let your lawyers have fun with it.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for your wonderful presentation. So we have a couple of questions that we're going to ask the panel. I think I'm going to sit down. Hopefully these mics will work. But hopefully we'll get to this.
You have to turn them on.
You
You got to turn them on? Okay. The toughest thing about moderating a conversation is just knowing how the technology works. So our first question is, in our justice work, we put our faith in our ability to advocate and in human judgment, to see what's right. Yet AI is being used in some settings to replace the human who decides benefit eligibility, sentencing, or fines. AI, as I understand it, needs to be trained with data to shape the probabilities that it uses to serve up appropriate information or to make decisions. As Julie and Claudia have raised, there's a black box of data from which AI is being taught that sometimes doesn't include everybody, and so the results may continue to perpetuate existing inequities. So question to both Ivy and Lester, is this concern valid, and how are the systems that you're working on addressing these issues? So who wants to start?
I figured out how to turn my mic on, I can start.
Okay.
Of course it's valid. It's like, again, I think the best way to understand the technology is to think of it as a tool, right? And with any tool, tools can be used as weapons. They can have negative aspects. When we invented the car, we also invented the car accident. When we invented the plane, we invented the plane crash, right? So the fact that these tools could be used and produce harmful results is absolutely correct. That said, something like 15% of people that know they have a legal problem in the United States get some form of assistance. It's not good enough, right? So we have to have tools that we use to try to solve that problem. And I mean, I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been a lawyer and working at the intersection of law and technology for 20 years. And I've never been more excited about where the technology is going and the potential impact that it has. So the way that I frame the problem is to create a framework for understanding what tool you're building. So there is a form of artificial intelligence called predictive analytics, which is what they use, some courts have tried to use to detect recidivism or sentencing patterns or how likely somebody is going to repeat a crime or whatever. That's a flavor of artificial intelligence. We ought to think really long and hard about how we use those tools and what we're using to train them. I think what the panelist said was dead on, right? But building a system that can look inside of a document and extract information and understand the context of what that document is to help us serve more people is probably a pretty safe tool. We just need to be aware of how we're training that and what we're using it for. So both can exist. That's my response.
Yeah, so to echo what Ivy said, absolutely. It's a valid concern. You know, AI needs good representative data to be good representative AI. You know, we know the Stanford-Suffolk Natural Language Project, one of the sources of data for that project is Reddit. And Reddit's got thousands and thousands of questions every month that people are asking on legal answers. Well, we know there's an inherent population problem with Reddit. Reddit users generally tend to skew younger and male, right? So that's why one of the reasons I'm up here asking for data sets is so that we can offset some of that problem. You know, to mitigate those population issues, though, one of the things that we're making sure we do with this project is auditing our machine learning algorithms and testing them against data it's never seen before to make sure they are working well and they are being representative. The other thing that makes us excited to support this specific natural language processing project is David Colarusso and Margaret Hagan are our two leading developers on this, and both of those are attorneys. Margaret Hagan, I'm sure many people in this room are familiar with her work from Stanford, and David Colarusso is a former legal aid attorney from Massachusetts who's now a professor at Suffolk Law School. So we know that they have the right mindset to be thinking about these sort of issues as they build these tools.
So Claudia, what do you think? Will algorithms be out of our control, or do we have the ability to influence them?
The algorithm is only as good as the assumptions that it makes. Remember the circle. If you assume the bear doesn't stand up, there goes the head, and if you assume the bear is not gonna do this, the algorithm is only gonna be good as long as you understand what limitations it has. And for us as attorneys, like Julia said, we have to probe that hard. We have to understand what does it leave out, because it's in what it leaves out where the problem will come. So, you know, I love technology. I've been doing technology also for like 21 years. I've been doing online forms for 10. I don't have a problem with technology. I just want to make sure that the technology, whoever the vendor is, because what's going to happen is that it's not going to affect the 2,400 people that talk to that hotline agent in the month, right? It's going to affect tens of thousands of people. So the volume of harm is enormous, it's exponential. And so what we need to know is when a problem is detected, because the algorithm wasn't designed to handle that new nonlinear reality issue of poverty, what is the vendor gonna do? Are you gonna stop using the algorithm and go back to manual? Or is the vendor going to immediately put all hands on deck, bring all the mathematicians again, or are they gonna be arrogant and full of hubris and say, oh, we believe that this is not a concern, this is user error, and they're gonna put the burden on you to bring you the data that shows that the algorithm is harming tons, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of your clients. So it's not the algorithm that's the problem, it's what the algorithm leaves out and the assumptions that it makes in a non-linear world.
Thank you, Claudia. To Julia, how can civil legal service providers be prepared to address this?
So I'll start by stealing a line from Sherilyn Eiffel from the Legal Defense Fund that she said at a symposium the other week about these systems. If you take a technological system and place it on top of a system that is already racist, classist, and sexist, you will end up with technology that is racist, sexist, and classist. And so our jobs don't disappear because our clients can now get benefits more easily through an online system. We still have to fix the underlying systems that use this technology, and we have to be in the room when we're deciding what this technology looks like. That can be kind of scary because a lot of times we don't even know this is happening, right? These systems are getting funded either federally or by the state, and it's happening without us even noticing. Because they're not trying to make it very obvious to us. And so we have to ask ourselves questions. What's happening at a state level? What's going on in our state legislatures? We have to ask our clients, what are you seeing? What changes have you experienced? Is the system you're using now different in some sort of discernible way from the system you used before? And then we have to get in the room to have conversations with the people who are making these decisions. And if they don't listen to us, if they don't make systems that work for our clients, if they don't make systems that, as Claudia say, do no harm, we have to litigate. And we have to litigate to protect the social safety nets that our clients rely so heavily on.
So if AI is coming, are there places that we should be using it? That's a question to all of the panelists. I don't know if you want to start, Julia?
Sure. I'll say that, again, if we build these systems correctly with the right people in mind, they can be very helpful. There's a lot that we do as legal services attorneys that is rote. There's a lot that our clients do that is rote that we could automate to do faster, to help more people. I was speaking the other day with Sharon Dietrich from Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, and we discussed that, as many of you know, there's clean slate legislation that passed in Pennsylvania that addresses sealing, automatic sealing of criminal records. That's a great way to use automation. But you should know that that automation was developed hand in hand with legal services attorneys. It was developed to ensure that it took the right data, that it had the right data, that the data was fixed before it went into the system, and that there were safeguards in place if the sealing didn't work correctly. So there are ways to do this that can dramatically help our clients, but we have to be at the table when it's decided.
And I gotta say that I think AI is here. I think eventually we will be practicing there, right? So it's not a matter of when it comes, it's here. Big data is here. And I give you an example. Remember the race to solve the Genome Project? Bednar over there in Monterrey and all of that? That was a competition. And we solved the genome, the human genome, right? And now we have cancer treatment that's customized to individual genomes, right? Problem, NIH only has, their data set is based on 87% European sample. So NIH now, remember when that got solved, now has recognized that it has a problem, and they're starting a project called All is One, All on Us, where they're going to specific communities to see if they can recruit African American and Latino communities to be part of that, so that they can use then the different genetic markers on these other communities to develop better and advanced cancer treatment, right? So I think that artificial intelligence is here. And for me, the promise, you know, the administrative questions, I will tell you, since I did the legal advice science in Baylegal, I understand moving the butters and knives curve by changing the inputs, right? And we can move that out. So let's say that intake takes 25% of all of our resources, and we somehow make that more efficient. How much is that? 100 million? Boom, 100 million more of capacity in litigation and appellate advocacy. Yes, we want that, right? But the more important, the more exciting part is the research part. How do we do what Marshall did, Justice Marshall did, and generate hypotheses about poverty, systems, and racism, and then from those hypotheses generate litigation strategies that then we go and enact in a concerted effort across the country, and we push on the system, generate the data again, and again refine the algorithms, refine the methodology, refine the litigation strategy, and all the tools, because we as lawyers have more tools than just going to court, right? We can use the press, community organizing, community capacity building, lobbying, whatever. Right? To me, that's the promise of this, is that future of research to end poverty and racism and to really generate litigation strategies that are specifically driven to end those scourges that have been our original sin. That's what the promise of this is. The administrative decision-making and all of that is shifting the Patterson knife's curve further. Maybe it will increase capacity, but the bottom line is if these groups are not diverse, if these groups don't know how to think in parallel, if these groups don't understand culture, if these groups don't understand the legal domain, because we over-glorify coders, if these groups don't have lawyers asking the questions, we're going to, in fact, we could end up causing more harm, because we may release things that are problematic, and then we spend a lot of resources fine-tuning them, where if we did them with the correct data sets, diverse teams, inclusiveness, and all of that, then what we would design would be better, and then if the people developing those are very open to the feedback too, because that's the other part, is that this black box becomes, oh, it's been designed by, PhDs from Stanford and MIT and all this, and then it becomes untouchable. And you know what? It's not. It was created by humans. It can be changed.
So maybe just to pull it back for a second, and again, I think if we just think about it as technology, and we think about what problems we're trying to solve, and I'll tell just a really quick story. For those of you who've heard me speak before, I always tell the story, but one of my best friends is a lawyer in Chicago who graduated law school in 1992 and went to work for a really large law firm in Chicago, and he had the distinct honor of working for the managing partner who was a world-famous litigator. And he described his job in 1992 as going to court every day and carrying the briefcase and boxes and taking notes. And he said his day started at 4 p.m. when they got back from court, and he would do whatever work the partner had requested he to do, and that usually meant he worked till like 6 in the morning doing this work, getting ready for court the next day. And this particular day they came back and the partner asked them, he said, Dave, I need you to find this word in the stack of depositions. It was about 6 feet tall. He said, I want you to read through every one of those depositions and all of these transcripts and just look for this one word in those documents. And so the partner left knowing for sure that Dave would be on task for the next 8 hours at least doing this work. And Dave turned to the paralegal and he said, don't we have these depositions on floppy disks? And the paralegal said, we do. And he said, bring me the floppy disk. And he put it into the computer and he hit Control F. And he found the 19 places that word was used. And an hour later, he walked into the partner's office and he said, here are highlighted in all of these depositions where that word was used. And the partner looked at him and said, that is really impressive, but there is no way it's accurate. And Dave said, I think it is pretty accurate, actually. He told him about Control F, and the partner went crazy. He was like, this is like magic. Control F. And the worst part of the story is that like a week later, the partner went into their partner meeting and told this story of the magic of Control F. And the partners were actually mad about it because it said, that cost us $1,800. So we get billed for his time doing that work, and he did it so fast, right? So they were actually disappointed in Control F. But the reason I tell that story is that's artificial intelligence. Can you imagine doing the job that you do right now without the internet, without computers, without Control F? right? And you don't call it artificial intelligence. You don't think about the dangers of what if it doesn't find the word, what if it doesn't find a phrase, right? We rely on these tools to do our jobs. And so the framework we have to put in place when we think about this, and that's why I put in my slides the whole concept of what processes are. They take inputs, they process, and they give outputs. But that's not the full story of artificial intelligence. The full story of artificial intelligence is it does all of those things, but it only makes a prediction. And the best artificial intelligence tools require a human taking information from that prediction to make a decision, right? The computers don't have wisdom that lawyers have. That's when we talk about practicing at the top of our license. We're talking about what are the tools that give me enough transparency, enough clarity of the problem that I can make the best decision. And then when the human makes a decision, that actually gets fed back into the data and is used to train the data to make the tool even smarter. And so it's this loop, but it always envisions a human until it gets so good at something and where the risks are so small that maybe we take the human element out of it. But for the most part, when we think about these problems, think about unpacking your day. Think about unpacking the work that your agency does. Where can we put Control F into place that makes us more efficient in doing it? And what is the risk in doing it? And if the risk is something really big, then it's probably not wise, right? You know, cars can start to drive themselves, yet I'm not going to get in one yet. Right? The risk is just too high. They haven't figured it all out yet. But it's going in that direction. But cars that can detect things that I can't see, like in my blind spot, or if a car's slowing down really fast in front of me and it starts to slow my car down, I'll drive that car every day. That's artificial intelligence. It still requires a human. So I think that, to me, is the safest way to put this into a framework to try to understand it.
Sure. So, you know, we know the tools and technologies that legal organizations and judiciaries are looking at, that some of these are utilizing artificial intelligence. From our perspective at Pew and our involvement in the legal information portals, we're excited about the use of AI to help people navigate their legal issues, as we think legal information portals can lead to more people having more positive interactions with the legal system. And given the number of people looking online for help right now and not finding any, you know, we know that AI is equipped to help in this endeavor. We also know that more than half of all judiciaries in this country right now are looking at online dispute resolution as a tool to improve people's experiences with the courts. And that some of these ODR systems do utilize an AI element to make determinative judgments. You know, and one of the roles that we want to play at Pew is evaluating these systems and testing their ability to increase their access to justice. You know, we need to be evaluating all these AI systems and auditing them accordingly. To echo what Julia has said today, you know, I just implore everyone in this room to get involved with the technology efforts that are being undertaken in your community. You know, learn about AI, learn about its impacts, learn what to be wary of, learn what to be excited by. You know, talk to people working in AI and legal, talk to Ivy, talk to the David Colarusos and Margaret Hagans of the world, and get to understand what it is from their perspective. And, you know, and share your thoughts and concerns with your communities as these projects are moving forward.
So, sorry, I'm checking, you know, getting communications from the boss over there. So we do want to take some audience questions if anyone has one. I think right here on the waving his hand, right there, Doug.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Hansley. I'm from Boston with the Volunteer Lawyers Project. Thank you again, everybody, for coming out for this panel. AI is a big topic for me. I am such a tech nerd. It is insane. And I really appreciated you guys helping explain some of the benefits and some of the challenges that come with AI. One of the things that I really want everyone in this room to know is that a lot of these algorithms are already deployed and being used in our justice system. Currently, Florida has a system called the Caucus system. It stands for the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions. Basically what this does, it's a risk assessment tool that is used to advise judges in sentencing. And it's been found that this has created a lot of damage and harm at scale. And this is what they were talking about with algorithms. It does things automatically. So you can mess a lot more things up much faster. And so with the Caucus system, basically it's just completely wrong. It's supposed to predict like, oh, is this person a risk? Should we let them out on bail? And it's basically been found through a ProPublica report in 2016 that it's basically discriminating against black people, obviously. And it's like 2 times higher discrimination, 2 times less discrimination against whites, which leads to just disproportionate sentencing and a lot of other things. So a lot of these systems are already deployed. It's created by a vendor called Equivant. And yeah, basically it's supposed to predict a defendant's risk of committing another crime, and it just does not do that well. So it's already been trying to be challenged in higher courts, and a lot of courts are pushing back. You know, there's a lot of black box talk about this, right? There's no transparency in the algorithm that they have. They say they use a 137-point questionnaire. They throw the big words out like big data and machine learning, so we know this person's a risk. And it's just not true. They actually found in a Dartmouth College study that Caucus is no better at predicting an individual's risk of recidivism than random volunteers recruited from the internet. And the courts are purchasing this software. They're paying a lot of money. So imagine if you're a judge, right, and your court purchased this software. The people behind it say they have all these algorithms, and they say that this defendant's a high risk when they're not. So basically, yeah, it's a completely insane system. It's called Caucus with 1 S. You guys should look into it. But AI is already here, right? Every time you guys use your iPhone and it captures a face and it's like, oh, hey, there's Rick. And you're like, oh, Rick, what's up? I see you in the photos. That's AI. All these things are already being deployed. And so, yeah, I just want you guys to know that the risk is very real. And it's something that, not to fearmonger, but it is something to pay attention to, because a lot of these companies, they make money hand over fist off people not understanding the technology and not understanding how it works. So I just advise a lot of caution. There's so much great material out there for you guys to get involved and understand more about artificial intelligence. And I think it rests on us to make sure that we don't slip into this dystopia. Because, you know, it discriminated, I think they studied it and they found that 7,000 people in Florida, they discriminated heavily against black people, minorities, people of color. They released white offenders at like far higher rates, and then they actually ended up committing more crimes. It's just insane. So you can actually see it in the ProPublica report and also an Atlantic article. But read up on Caucus, please.
Thank you so much. Was there a question on this side by Radhika?
Product engineering and processing groups.
Either way, I don't know if it's on.
Product engineering and processing industries use national standards to help guide them in their efforts to both design and market their products. And so I want to know whether or not this is going to be part of our artificial design systems that we use in courts, and who's going to be on those standards institutes, positions, committees, if they will exist.
Who's comfortable? Okay.
I'll start by saying that when I first started working on this question of looking at these modernized public benefit systems, what I quickly discovered is that there was not a set of best practices out there when it comes to what works for the end users, especially. And we actually luckily just got a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to study this and hopefully put out a report that's going to address some of those concerns as to what the guidelines and standards should be. I can tell you that we've talked to a lot of state agencies over the last few months, and there hasn't necessarily been anything that has been applied consistently. Some have mentioned usability studies, some have mentioned some studies to talk about readability as to and looking at whether there is any sort of internal discrimination, but there hasn't been any sort of set standard. For unemployment insurance, the Department of Labor recently put out guidelines that have to be addressed by state agencies, like a checklist, right, before they implement a new system. Most state agencies are about to implement a new system and they go, oh, okay, I guess we should go through this checklist right now. That's often how the checklists from the federal government work. So there's a question as to how we can move towards a system where there are standards that are consistent. I don't think we've done a great job of that, at this point, and I think the criminal justice example is really pertinent to that we haven't studied these systems in a way to know how we should test them and fix them before we implement them.
And I would recommend that all of you read up on how, e-discovery has been around now for about 12, 15 years. And in e-discovery, they're doing the control F, but en masse, right? They're looking through emails, they're looking through multiple data sources to find evidence, right, when there's a litigation going on. In e-discovery, they actually have very specific metrics that they use to validate the outputs. Now, those e-discovery metrics could potentially work in these administrative decisions that are going to grant or deny or recommend legal services or public benefits and stuff like that. But I don't know of anyone that's looking at taking the e-discovery metrics and validation techniques and applying them to some of these things, etc. The other thing is that there's a small group that includes Jonathan Pyle and Angela Tripp and Abby Jaid, and some of us that comment once in a while that have been talking a little bit about standards from a legal aid perspective, which include due process, transparency, confidentiality, privacy protection, not selling the data, putting that you're not going to sell the data in terms of use. The clicks issue, that's a real issue. People dismiss it. But, some people want to track everything you do in their software. Why? Why do they need it? Maybe they're going to market to you, etc. So you just got to, so there's that little group and they do presentations. And so if anybody wants to plug into that, you can reach out to the people that are mentioned or email me and I can connect you with that group because they're looking at standards from the legal aid community perspective, but it's not standards for, automated online intake or anything like that. Now you probably, I don't know if you validate anything with your tool, like false positive and false negatives, like all of those. But we don't have clear standards yet. And there's a NEEM, which is a technology standard, the NEEM standards, they're very well known. But as far as I know, only the Florida Justice Center sits on the NEEM that's looking at core technology. I don't think that a lot of the groups here could afford to be a NEEM member to sit at that standard board. But there is a group, and some of you could look into sitting into that as they develop court-specific technology, because that's where those are going to come from.
Yeah, there are a couple of different technical standards bodies working in this space. From the court perspective, I would probably invite you to talk to Dr. Tom Clark from NCSC at the National Center for State Courts, and he could direct you to the appropriate different technical standards. I would hurry because he's going to be retiring very soon. So. And then from the online legal information portals perspective, there is also an OASIS litigant portal standard that's currently in development. I think this is one of the issues that's happening with some of these technologies, is that ideally we would have standards in place before the mass deployment of these technologies, and instead the standards are catching up to the technologies after they've been deployed, and it's certainly a challenge that the technical community faces with these issues.
I'm going to take one more question.
Well, so I'm David Udell, and I've also been working with Alex Gulata to look at some of the regulatory schemes and some of the litigation experiences that are happening across disciplines. And so I think you've addressed a lot of what I had wanted to say. I just want to point out in response to Ivy's remark about, well, we needed cars, and then we had car crashes, that Ralph Nader wrote, I think, Unsafe at Any Speed to launch the consumer rights movement, which was a response to the fact that the industry was really not at all focused on what it could do. In fact, it was resistant to things like seat belts, to airbags. And if you look at the regulation of cars, it's quite elaborate now. I mean, we have standards for tires and, alcohol on the road. So there's just a very vast array of things that are kind of known unknowns or unknown unknowns that are at the heart of this. And we're not the only discipline. It's tempting to think, and I think it's important to think, well, what's unique about the legal aid and justice environment? But there's a lot to be learned from experiences across industry, across other disciplines, both in how they regulate it and in the disasters that have already happened across those disciplines.
Do you want to respond, Ivy?
So just two really quick follow-ups. That's a great point, and I totally agree. I just want to call out that the state of California is just in the last couple of weeks commissioned a task force to analyze how these technology tools will be used to deliver legal services, and really what the recommendations of the task force are looking to do, or what they're charged to do, they have to be done by December 31st of next year, is to better understand what would have to change under the ethics rules and under the state laws and things like that in order to deploy these types of tools. So California is leading on this. I also just wanted to say, the Obama administration, near the end of his administration, put out a big report on this and called out a lot of these very things. And they pulled in industry leaders. My sense is that it's probably not happening anymore, but who knows? But anyway, so yeah, look, these are all really valid points, and at the end of the day, we can't necessarily stop them from happening, but we sure can get involved where we see them being used as weapons, and when they're being used unfairly. So, point we'll take.
So to wrap up the panel, I did want to give an opportunity for the panelists to kind of give us their closing thoughts. I mean, Ivy, since you have the mic, would you like to start off with some closing thoughts?
Just kind of again to drive this point home. Last year at NLADA, I was on a panel and we were talking about machine translation software, and there was a lot of concern in the room that Google Translate was going to mistranslate something on a web page. And I want to make the point I made last year, which is when we frame these problems, and they are problems, right? If we give information in a language that is incorrect because we tried to translate it and the translation didn't come through, we need to be aware of that. In some ways, we can't stop it, and we just need to know that, right? Because if I go to a web page and if I'm in France and I go to a web page, my browser detects that I speak English, and I'm on a French website, it will ask me if it wants to translate that web page into English. That has nothing to do with you. You can't stop that from happening, right? If somebody comes to your web page and their browser is set to Spanish, it will try to translate your web page into Spanish. The best strategy to solve these problems is to work to help train the tools so that when we're translating, when we're using the machine to help us, that we're training it with the right tools. So there are ways to get involved and do it, but I don't want to be fatalistic. My point is, this stuff is here, it's all around us, it's being used all the time. We can complain about it, but we can't stop it. But I think back to David's point, we can get involved and try to make it better. I'm more of an optimist, so I just look at the problem by saying, yes, and there's a bunch of great ways we can leverage it, and we ought to be doing that stuff, and let's go build those tools, and let's help more people, and I think we can solve this problem if we do that. So I'm going to be the optimist. Yeah.
Claudia?
Well, I think that everybody has to have an open mind and be intentional, right? We have very limited amount of time and very limited amount of focus. And though we cannot control what others do with our websites, with their browsers, we can control what we do with our tools and how we build them. Who is on our team? Is the team diverse? Can the team think in context? Is it parallel thinking, right? When you're multilingual, your brain is wired differently, and you can understand much more than a monolingual person when you read a poorly translated piece, right? That should have some weight. So I think that we all have to be really humble, and as much as we know, we have to listen to the end beneficiary and do everything that we can that what we build factors them in. And that starts with, first of all, making sure that there is inclusion and diversity of experiences. Because our world, our society, is not binary. And I want the technology to eventually break the legal binary, right? And only good technology is going to break the legal binary. And we need to think about problems that are bound, or what they call in math NP-complete, that are solvable, linear. And then we have to think about problems that are not bound, that have yet to be proved solvable, that are not NP-complete, because they're very, very complex and multidimensional. And remember that we live in a world where nature hides itself. And if you look at quantum physics, you're going to see things like the Heisenberg principle, and you're going to see that reality is 2 to the n. Right? When you are in a particular dimension, you're not observing all the other ones. These are all things that are still puzzling the big mathematicians that are working with the big supercomputers, right? Because there's a class of problems that need quantum computing to be solved. We're not there yet. I am super optimistic, though, about the research aspects. Once we get beyond the administrative parts of allocating this or that, or doing this decision or that, I'm excited about the research and breaking the genome of poverty and racism and developing the legal theories. And I'm really excited about the work that they're doing at MIT with Matthew Desmond, right, where they're focusing on housing and evictions, and this is being replicated in Virginia and in Utah and everything, and other litigation teams using data in San Mateo, everywhere, looking at how are we going to defend evictions more sophisticated in a more efficient way. To me, that's the promise of AI. It's when we change this world in a tangible way based on the data. And then the data is the new model. So that's what I'm excited about, and I hope we get to see that in the next 15 years.
Thank you, Claudia. Esther?
Yep. So first, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join this conversation today and to be a part of this group. I mean, on behalf of the Pew team, we're thrilled to be participating in events with people like yourselves who are doing truly exceptional work, so thank you. I hope today can start a conversation for everyone in this room about AI and the legal system. And if I could ask you to leave with one thing, it would be the importance of participating in the conversations happening in your community around AI and the legal system. And then the importance of evaluating the effectiveness of any AI efforts. Like I said earlier, we know that more than half of all judiciaries in state judiciaries are looking at systems that utilize AI to make judgments. And we know that the AI requires good representative data to be a good representative AI system. Now's the time to get involved. Learn everything you can about AI, understand the pitfalls, and understand the areas where it's beneficial to your constituents, and reach out to the people in your networks who are going through similar efforts. And then as these systems are rolled out, make sure they're undergoing rigorous evaluation, and not just post-implementation, but before they're implemented. Make sure they're being evaluated in the pre-implementation stage. AI in the legal world is here. Please make sure you're in the room helping guide this conversation.
Thank you, Lester and Julia.
So I want to agree that I think we have a lot to learn from the private sphere when it comes to how to use these technologies, because they're customer service focused, right? They know that they need to make their customer base happy when they're using these technologies, and I think that is often what is missed, at least when the government is using these technologies in state and federal systems. I'll give a quick example. As I said, I want my clients, and many of my clients want to receive notices about their benefits by email. But not a single state agency, and not even in Pennsylvania, can I get anyone to confirm for me that they've done analytics on those emails to make sure they're not picked up by spam folders. So you can see where there could be compounding problems with how we move forward in this technology. And it can be scary to think about getting involved. I am not a techie. I think I'm decent with technology, and our IT genius at PLA would often agree with me that I can do some basic functions. But when I'm in these rooms having these conversations, it's not about my technological savvy. And it's not even about my process savvy. They're talking about waterfall decision-making, sprint decision-making, component sharing, and I'm looking at them trying to make it seem like I have some sort of an idea of what's going on. But then I can still ask the questions based on what I'm seeing the system look like, based on what I know my clients experience. And that's something everyone in this room can do. And I really encourage you to do that. And to continue this conversation, I'd like to plug an afternoon session that I am doing with Kevin DeLabon from Arkansas, who's litigating these algorithms when they go awry. It's listed in your program actually as a defender side panel, so I want to flag it. We're going to be in Woodway 2 on the 4th level at 2:15, and we're going to be talking about how to identify these systems, how to get involved, and then how to litigate them when they haven't turned out correctly. So please join us at 2:15 to continue this conversation.
So thank you again to our panelists. By the way, you guys did a great job with the Ignite presentations, and we have it all recorded, so we were trying to be up on technology. Thank you for staying a little bit into lunch, but we hope you enjoyed the session. And just to follow up on Julia's point, is we do have a few sessions that will be kind of talking about what's happening in this space. I mentioned the ABA report. There will be a Justice for All session that will talk about the Justice for All projects. And then, of course, Lester mentioned the session that we will have later on that will discuss the layer on top of that, which is the Microsoft portal. I do want to say, after lunch, of course, we'll resume with workshops. The next time we will be all together as a plenary will be the awards luncheon tomorrow. I do hope you can join us on the civil side. We will be honoring a number of our colleagues, quite distinguished colleagues. Dawn mentioned the Chief Justice, Nathan Heck, and Sandra Brown. John Asher also will be receiving our Dennison Ray Award, and Jim Key will be receiving our Pierce Hickerson Award. So I do hope you can join us tomorrow at lunch in this room to honor your colleagues. Thanks again, enjoy the conference, and we'll see you around.